Okay, Brian, you can get started.
Thank you, Emily. Welcome, everyone, to CDW's Secure, Streamline, Succeed webinar focused on Microsoft 365 or Copilot for Microsoft 365, the latest highlights and roadmap. So my name is Brian Matthews. I'm the Head of Services, Strategy, and Development for Digital Workspace at CDW Canada. Copilot has taken my life by storm, as it has many people, at CDW and across the industry. It's been an extremely exciting, coming up on our first anniversary since the November 1st launch of Copilot, and just really excited to bring everybody up to speed. Clearly, this is a space that is evolving really, really quickly. We talk to customers all the time that have questions around security, around governance, around, end user training and adoption, and all of those great questions. And we're absolutely looking forward to talking more about those today. So I am here simply to kick off the session, hopefully bring a little energy to the real stars of the show. We do have some of the, sharpest Copilot subject matter experts from both Microsoft and CDW on the call today, and they're going to walk through a number of different topics. So just to level set on agenda, welcome and introductions is somewhat complete. So let's check that one off the agenda item list. Only 5 more to go. We'll dive into some recent Copilot from 365 highlights, a little bit of the roadmap and some of the new launches, a good chunk of time on Purview and security around Copilot, and talk a little bit about what's next. The other part that I would say is for anyone that has joined previous Copilot webinars that CDW has conducted, sometimes we do share our own internal CDW Copilot story and how we are thinking about Copilot within the walls of CDW. So I've shared in the past on a few of those webinars that we were, conducting a Copilot pilot. We had a user group of about 700 users globally that were testing Copilot in different departments and, gathering feedback and sharing best practices and all of those great examples, creating an AI council and all that kind of good work. And one of the new updates is we've very much completed that Copilot pilot, and the success and the ROI metrics that needed to happen were achieved. And we've actually started to roll out Copilot across the vast majority of our global organization, which is about 15,000 coworkers. So we are really excited for Copilot to turbocharge our productivity, and really excited for to bring more people into the Copilot tent at CDW. So a little bit of an update from our perspective, just on where we are from a Copilot journey, and then from here I'll pass it over to the team to kind of get started.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Brian. So I'll just kind of get started us off in terms of talking through some of the recent highlights around admin and management capabilities with Copilot. So I'm sure you would have seen this. There's a lot more reach now for Microsoft 365. So they kind of initially started off slowly. Now you can add Copilot not just on the commercial suites, but also on standalone plans. The Copilot dashboard piece, that again used to be part of Viva. Now it's a lot of that is free for use with Copilot, and that can give you insight into things like number of. It can now give you insight into things like number of active users. And then things like licensed employees or the percentage of Copilot licensed employees, right? And then within Viva itself, there's just quite a lot that's happening around Copilot. So you could effectively, as part of Viva Engage, create a community that is focused on the adoption piece. And then if we go to the learning piece, there's a Copilot Academy that kind of helps you learn more about some of the prompting techniques and some of those new features that are coming up. And then finally around Viva Insights, so that enables like a deeper look into how your organization is adopting Copilot. So that could be things around trend lines, top actions. It could be around slicing it by dates to kind of figure out when and how people are using Copilot. Now, the biggest piece I think that has happened in recent times, and that's always a concern with Copilot, is in terms of that security piece, and especially there's a concern around oversharing. So search and Copilot only return content to which users have permission. Now, users inadvertently, they may be given access to more content than they need. And so one of the ways that Microsoft kind of combated that is that they've come back with the data access governance reports. That are a collection of reports that help you discover SharePoint sites that potentially contain overshared or sensitive content. So that way you can apply appropriate security and compliance policies. And this will help you as admins discover potential oversharing within tenants, right? And this feature is rolling out pretty much now in August as we speak. And then the last piece is in terms of bringing two different Copilots together. So you can now effectively enable the Copilot for Sales plugin in Microsoft Teams and connect to Copilot for Sales. Now, moving on to the user capabilities with Copilot. So first and foremost, there's a lot of new features that's come around Excel. So you can now work on data ranges that resemble tables. You kind of needed to go into it and format a table before you could enable Copilot on it. And then now there's support for things like previews or formulas, so you always know how Copilot is doing things, and then also supports conditional formatting and complex queries. And then if we kind of look at Word and PowerPoint. In Word, previously, if you had a PDF file, you had to take that over back to the normal Copilot, convert it to Word, and then use it. You can now use it directly within Word. And then from a summarization feature perspective, you had certain upper limits. And so those have been increased massively. With Copilot in Word, now you can summarize documents that contain up to 80,000 words. So that's about 5 times what the limitation was. And then if you wanted to add, so within the flow of you're working through Word and PowerPoint, if you wanted to add visuals to it, you can go ahead and do that also in Word and PowerPoint now. So Copilot in Outlook, so now not just in terms of that drop-down thing, you can prompt and kind of have those pieces come up as you're crafting and organizing emails. You can rewrite, just like you do it in Word, in SharePoint, you can rewrite in SharePoint as well. And then in Forms, it's become interactive, right? So you can now create quizzes, and people can answer correctly, and then based on their intents and outputs, you can kind of drive them a certain way. So it's awesome if you're a teacher or a trainer, someone who's looking to engage in a more interactive way. So Copilot can help you with that. OneNote, you can now, so OneNote now picks up not just the typed text, but also the inked text. So if you're kind of using a digital workbook or something like that. In Teams, AI-powered the speaker technology that now expands to all team rooms, regardless of the microphone team, regardless of the microphone type. And then you do have now the shifts plugin. So if you're a supervisor who's trying to look at different shifts, frontline teams can now harness that power as well. One last piece that I'll kind of talk about here is that so this is just like a snapshot of some of the feature sets that I would say are still coming out or have come out in the last 60 days. Microsoft has been really good in terms of integrating feedback, in terms of taking the feedback from end users and from the community, from the early adopters of Copilot, and weaving it into the Copilot feature set. And so if you are using Copilot extensively, please do provide feedback. Microsoft does definitely do a good job of listening to it. I'm going to, so for the purposes of this webinar, I'm going to look at some advanced use cases, some interesting elements that normally don't get talked about as much. So I'm going to start there and kind of you'll see some of the pieces that I've talked about and how they kind of apply here, right? So let me just maybe start first and foremost with Word, right? So the Word piece, this is your typical blank document that you would see as you kind of start off on. I'm not going to go into the details of prompting at this stage, but I'm going to try to create a prompt that has goal, context, source, expectations, the whole piece. But what I want to focus on is that increased ability to refer to multiple file types, right? So for the longest time, there was limitation in terms of what kind of files you could access. So I'm going to go ahead and try to access those multiple files. Real life demos are always interesting, so hopefully it kind of goes off as expected. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of pull that through. And what you'll see is that I'm pulling in 3 different types of files. So even though, for example, that you might not be able to pull a Excel file, what you can do is pull in. I'll pick it up. Won't. Just. So I've got a Word file in there, I've got a PDF file, and I'm going to give it another shot to build. Yeah, it's there, and then it goes away. Yeah, so this PPT file actually has an Excel table in itself. And so even though I can't ingest the actual Excel table, I can use it as through the PowerPoint itself. And so I'm going to use 3 different types of files. So I've got a PDF file, I've got a PowerPoint file, I've got a Word file, and I've got a fairly detailed prompt that's going to pull through all of those 3 files and create an executive summary for me. Right. And so because of the way that prompt is structured, you'll see those different headings, but then you'll also see different tables, a comparative analysis. All of those pieces are complete. And I didn't have to kind of go through all of those 3 documents. I didn't have to ingest them separately. 3 different types of file types ingested in one prompt all at one time. Right. Now, as this kind of works through, I think we're almost there. So you'll see, like I said, the competing products piece. So it does have details of some competing products, but it's the ability to kind of pull all of that together. That's fairly impressive. And you probably are aware of this anyway. I can go back and edit it. I can change the tone of it. I can go to a different type of prompt, right? So I'm going to keep this for now. I'm going to change applications. And so where we're going now is Teams, right? And so this is a very, very often used use case where you kind of go into a meeting and you have this discussion and you can't really recall who is what and what the roles are within the organization, right? And so we kind of did a dry run of sorts. We kind of pulled together a meeting where we just had different people introduce themselves. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to pull all of that together in a consumable format, right? So I'm going to say, can you create a table? And so I'm not only going to ask for what I want in that, but I also want the format in a particular way. So I'm going to ask for a table to be created for each person on the call, with the first column being the name and the last column being the job title. And so that provides you something that is very, very consumable. You can kind of take that away and use it straight away, right? So this is, I won't play the video for now, but you'll see that's based on the summary, that's what's included. It's kind of taken that from the video and then created a fairly good way to kind of consume that. The last piece, I think, is the most complicated piece that we're going to talk about today. And so that is around the Excel piece. And I get a lot of questions about, hey, can Copilot in Excel be used to write macros? So the Copilot in Excel can be used to write macros. It can provide that guidance of sorts, but there is a bit of a manual step to kind of have them work in action. So what I'm sharing on the screen now is your typical Excel sheet. It's got a quite a detailed sales inventory in terms of different types of accounts, business units, currencies, and then the details around that. And so what I'm going to do is try to create a macro, a VBA script, and then action that script, right? So let's maybe look at this, right? So first and foremost, this is a normal file. It won't really work. I need to save it as a macro-enabled workbook, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Just rename it to copy. Yeah. So I've gone ahead and renamed it, resaved it as a macro-enabled workbook. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try something fairly simple because I'm just trying to illustrate that ability to write VBA code, right? So I'm going to go in and say, write VBA code to hide all rows where account contains expense. And I am putting those quotation marks in because I wanted to be able to parse through this and do an exact match in terms of this column. I don't need to specify that if it's exactly expense or not. I'm just going to say if it contains expense, I need a macro that would hide all of that, right? So I'm going to go ahead and ask it to kind of work on writing that, the VBA code for me to work on that macro. It's going to take a little bit of time to do that. Sometimes it will come back in a way where it will actually not just actually write the piece, but also kind of tell you how to do it. And so what you can do, let me just open this up. Is you can come back into the to the VBA editor that you're currently seeing on screen, and then that exact code that we just saw, we're going to copy that in. I can get my cursor to work as intended. I'm going to go ahead and so I've gone ahead and done that. So it kind of gives you that instructions, right? So before running the code, make sure to change sheet 1. So this is sheet 1 here to the actual name, right? And just the range to column where you, yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to, I think it was financials. Let me just double confirm that. And then on the range, so there. Three, 12273. Let's try that. I think that's how big it is, but let's kind of do a quick run of it. And so what's happening at the back end? Let me just actually go ahead and so it's kind of running that macro right at the back end. I think I'll just maybe over text my system as I've kind of done that. Yeah, we just need to. Yeah, I think I've just overtaxed the Excel sheet as I kind of work through it. Yeah, save that. I'll just kind of wait for it to kind of come up again. Micah, I'll just Brian, if you want to just reshare your presentation, continue, and then later in the webinar, if we have time, I can bring up the revised Excel sheet as it kind of comes back on. Right. Okay. Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Shahab and Brian. I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about some of the new features that are coming down the road. They're is a ton of work every single day that's going on to make sure we're developing for the future. And as Shahab mentioned, we're really at Microsoft really trying to constantly listen to our customers and understand what are the features that we need to develop and the different capabilities that we need to develop for tomorrow. So as you can imagine, we're often asked, what's coming and when is it coming? And understanding technology change is critical to successful change management. That's why Microsoft has been continuously updating our Microsoft 365 roadmap. So if you're not familiar with Microsoft 365 roadmap, I just posted a link in the chat earlier. It's basically a central location for IT and for business decision makers to better understand what our Microsoft roadmap looks like. You can filter by product, you can filter by release date, you can filter by platform, and it gives you a whole list of features and when those features are going to be released. And it gives you a bit of an overview of what those features are. So specific to Copilot, if you were to log on to Microsoft 365 roadmap, you would see over 100 different features that are currently in development, whether they're in preview or actively being rolled out, and what the timeline is for some of those features. I'm going to go over 4 specific features today that are currently on Microsoft 365 roadmap. The first one is OneDrive. Copilot is coming to File Viewer. The integration of Copilot within File Viewer is ultimately going to allow you to find documents, to summarize documents, and then to compare files with the click of a button. You can ask Copilot to create tables, to compare multiple files, and you can use Copilot to search for files within File Viewer, which is a pretty cool addition. The second one within OneDrive, which I'm going to cover, is in addition to Copilot coming to File Viewer, next month, you'll be able to add Copilot-generated summaries when you share documents with colleagues. So these summaries included in the document sharing notification give your recipients immediate context around a document and a quick overview of its content without needing to open the entire document and read it all. So sharing summaries ultimately helps increase the engagement with the document. So people share presentations with me all the time, whether it's a PowerPoint presentation, whether it's a PDF document, whether it's a Word document. And oftentimes they share it without any context. It's kind of a click here and read the document. And then I open up the document and it's a 30-slide PowerPoint deck. This feature will ultimately allow individuals to share content regardless of the file format. So PDF, PowerPoint, Word document, Excel, and add context at the click of a button. So really cool feature coming to OneDrive. The next one, which I'm going to talk about, is in Outlook. And Outlook has seen a ton of innovation over the past year with the integration of Copilot. And coming later this year, you're going to be able to ask Copilot with a prompt, and you can see it on the screen right here, to schedule a meeting. So it's actually going to be able to guide you through the meeting scheduling process. So Copilot understands requests for meeting titles because it has access to your Microsoft Graph, and it can suggest relevant people that should attend the meeting, files that should be part of that meeting, and then available times where all those meeting attendees are free. Copilot can also draft an agenda and help you do all of these different things at the click of a button. The next feature, and this is seem to be frozen.
So we're just having issues because just the number of people who are on the webinar. So that's why my system's dying and your system's
So
dying.
Brian, if you wanna switch to the next slide.
Our actual local systems are dying just because of the number of people on the webinar.
Yeah, no
You
problem.
seem to have a lot of people on the webinar.
Your audio is still coming through nice and clear, so you can speak to it. And I just went to the next slide.
Awesome. So you should be on the schedule from email with Copilot slide. This is my favorite feature. This is awesome. I use this feature easily 3 to 4 times a week. Oftentimes you want to go from email to meeting. And Copilot will now help you do this seamlessly. So you can now schedule a meeting directly from an email conversation. It saves you time and effort by generating a meeting invitation. And it also includes a meeting title, the agenda of the meeting, a full conversation summary, as well as a pre-filled attendee list from the email thread, and then it attaches the email onto the meeting invitation. So super cool feature, the ability to schedule a meeting directly from Outlook and include an entire agenda and include all the attendees from the email directly within that meeting invitation, which is pretty cool. So we want to go to the next slide. We've spoken about Copilot for M365, which leverages large language models in the cloud. But I want to take a moment and shift gears just a little and talk about some of the transformation we're seeing on the edge with Windows 11. The NPU, or a neural processing unit, is a key part of the Copilot Plus PC. Some of you may have heard it, and there may be others out there that are thinking, what on earth is an NPU? So as I mentioned, NPU stands for Neural Processing Unit, and it is a specialized brain for your PC that's built into the main processor alongside the CPU and the GPU. It's designed specifically for crunching numbers and running AI workloads. And you're probably thinking, well, doesn't the CPU and the GPU do this? Yes, it does. The reality is that comes with a caveat, and it means more power consumption and using resources of your CPU and your GPU. The NPU acts as the perfect sidekick that can run these AI workloads fast while also being super power efficient. And if we go to the next slide, a whole host of Windows manufacturers, including Microsoft and our first-party Surface devices, are releasing Copilot Plus PCs. These are PCs that have an NPU with 40 TOPS of peak speed performance, 16 gigabytes of memory, and then minimum storage requirements. So really, really cool to see how we're not only infusing AI with Copilot for Microsoft 365 in the cloud, but we're also thinking about AI experiences on the edge with Windows 11. And I will pass it off to Sydney to talk through security.
You're still on mute, Cindy.
I noticed that. Yes, I did. See, the best of us, we still forget. But yeah, I'm going to be talking about security. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my camera just because hearing that there might be some streaming issues here and lag. So I'm going to turn off my camera. I wanted to say hello, and I'm going to talk to you about security. So 1 minute. Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going to go through here. I'm going to take control. There we go. So thanks for that. So my name is Cindy Bremner, and I'm a senior solutions architect here at CDW. And my role as a trusted advisor is to help customers to secure and protect their data, whether it's in the cloud or on-prem. So this presentation will be brief and scripted for anybody who knows me well. But hopefully it will encourage you to meet with me later to discuss your security needs for Copilot and getting your environment ready for your Copilot users. To start, I'd like to share what I've been reading and seeing in the last years, and that is businesses are already creating more data than ever before. The volume of data being generated globally is doubling every 2 years. And as you leverage Copilot, you'll generate even more data. You don't want your users inadvertently discovering your data security vulnerabilities. So setting up a good security plan before you deploy Copilot is great practice. Some of the most asked questions that I get are, how do I know where my data is? How do I classify my data? How do I protect my data? And how do I govern my data? So how do you manage and govern this data? Well, it's Microsoft Purview. Purview helps you to gain visibility into your data across your organization, as I mentioned, on-prem, in the cloud, and also other applications and platforms. Safeguard and manage sensitive data across its life cycle wherever it lives. Govern data seamlessly in new, comprehensive ways, and manage critical data risks and regulatory requirements. Most organizations today have a license that includes Purview, but they don't know how to start using it. The questions that we commonly get asked are, what licensing do I need? So then we will respond with some pretty top 5 questions. And that is, well, what are you using today? What kind of licensing are you looking at in the future? What are your problems and concerns today? How do you want to secure your data if you haven't already? How mature are your users in AI? And what is your dot on the horizon? CDW can take this info and run Compliance Manager to do a technical scan to see how your information aligns with the Purview policies and best practices. And we can also identify where the gaps are. As I mentioned earlier, you don't want your users to be the ones to discover your vulnerabilities. So this alignment exercise provides good insights into the next steps for prepping your environment for Copilot. Now let's have a look at the common high-level steps to secure Copilot. So the first one we would recommend is prepare your data. So Copilot for M365 needs access to quality and organized data to enhance its recommendations and output. So metadata provides information that describes data, while labels and tags assign categories to your data. By doing this, you make your data more searchable, discoverable, and manageable, which in turn will improve the accuracy and relevance of your AI results. Secure your data. Copilot for M365 uses your organization's permissions and security controls as guardrails to control what data it can access. Some organizations have experienced an AI-related security or privacy incident whereby it's the internal and not external parties that were the cause of the data compromise. When using Copilot, it's essential to control its access to ensure the security of your data. Optimize your data. Copilot for M365 will drive long-term benefits if proper governance and information management processes are proactively implemented. Now let's take a closer look at what Purview offers to protect your data. Now that you understand the need to protect sensitive data, you will want to establish a protection plan to address the risks of accidental or inappropriate sharing of sensitive information across the applications, services, and tools that your users use every day. Your employees access data from a multitude of devices and locations, and they engage with multiple internal and external business partners. So these touch points can expose your organization to data oversharing or even present risks of inappropriate data disclosure, which can result in regulatory compliance concerns. As part of our information protection solution here, Microsoft offers unified data loss prevention that provides a consistent set of policies and actions across your ecosystem of apps, services, both on-prem and in the cloud. These capabilities automatically classify your data, apply the correct information protection policy, and then enforce policies in a way that's consistent and fully transparent. These capabilities ensure that your employees will only use and share the data within its approved regulatory and internal security policy context. DLP automatically blocks actions outside of this context, which prevents accidental or inappropriate data sharing. DLP's deep integration with the security stack creates a holistic and clear information protection solution in this market today because it provides full control and auditability from policy creation to policy enforcement to incident remediation to end user education. The classification engine for DLP is common across all the Microsoft offerings. The engine natively incorporates 90+ sensitive information types and also supports the creation of custom types. Some custom types could be internal processes and number assignments that you have. You can use that as custom information types and leverage them. You can access the comprehensive data loss prevention capabilities in desktop apps like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Edge, on-premise file shares, and within services like Teams, Exchange, SharePoint, and OneDrive. So these capabilities extend to third-party apps and browsers like Chrome and services such as Box, Dropbox, Salesforce, and others. DLP enables you to automatically block sharing of chat messages, emails, and documents. DLP also ensures that users remain fully productive and aware of any policy violations via tips and notifications that explain why the content that they're sharing is being blocked, specific compliance violations, and how they can address the issue in future. It also supports provisions for activities deemed non-compliant by a policy, but need to be allowed due to a business reason while limiting interruptions. So business justifications can be reviewed post-event to ensure they were appropriate. Now, there is one caveat that I'd like to add from a security standpoint, and that is it's post-event. So even though somebody's justifying something, we get to read it after it's already been done. So that's just an FYI that I would elaborate on if we met together and talked about your requirements. And here's a screenshot of a DLP example. So this is in email, and as I mentioned, DLP does span across many different services and workloads. So this is an example of email. All of these messages can be customized to your environment, but as an example, this one is somebody's trying to share their visa number, and then it comes back with that policy tip saying you can't do that. But hey, here's a link where you can learn more, and you as a company can customize that message. Perhaps it's call the help desk or refer to a site where they can read about it. Here's another example of what it can look like in email. You can just have a policy tip right at the top with a learn more. Now, I did mention Teams. Teams does need E5 to have DLP, but if you do have the E5 license, it does search, Teams chats as well. So here in this example, somebody's trying to share some insurance numbers. They will get a message before, even when they press enter, it won't go through. They will be stopped and it will say that it's been blocked. What can I do is that customized link that I was saying a few minutes ago where you can redirect the user to get some assistance. Now we're going to move into information protection. So I'm sure many of you have heard about data classification and labeling. Well, that's what this is, and that's what we're going to talk about. So earlier I said, organizations want to know where their data is and how to protect it. Well, Purview's information protection is the comprehensive set of both manual and automatic data classification methods. Especially notable are the classifiers that leverage machine learning to automatically identify and classify sensitive data content at scale using pattern matching methods. So these methods ensure high accuracy in Microsoft's classification capabilities. Once you know your data, you can benefit from using Microsoft's built-in labeling and protection experience in your core apps like Word, Excel, or PowerPoint, or services like SharePoint, Exchange, or Power BI. This lowers your costs too by eliminating the need to deploy and maintain additional software. Everything is built under the Microsoft umbrella. No need for third party. The information protection platform further extends Microsoft's classification, labeling, and protection experience to non-Microsoft apps, services, and file types. So again, it's not just Microsoft that native Microsoft, it also spans across other apps. In addition to information protection for your apps and services, Microsoft also has built-in encryption into 365 services and data protection. The encryption built into Entra ID, FYI, Entra ID, remember, formerly known as Azure AD. So the encryption is built into Entra ID to protect your data while it's at rest, in transit, and in use. Let's have a look at some samples of labeling. So in this case, I'm trying to see if I could make it bigger for you. Oops, I'm just going to go back one screen. But in this example, if you don't see it too clearly, I'll try and make it as large as I can here. But what I wanted to show you here are 3 different screenshots. So you've got one that's in Excel where you can apply these labels, these classification labels. And just an FYI, there's always the common 4: highly confidential, confidential, internal, and public. Those are the 4 top common data classification labels that people like to create. You can further extend that to customize, of course. So we can use it in Excel. You can use it in Outlook, whether it's on the web or on the desktop client, and you can even use it while using your mobile app. So as long as you're signed into 365 on your mobile app, you can use these sensitivity labels as well. Again, it spans across everything that you're working on. I don't know how well you can see this picture, but there is another step that you can do too. So if you're going to allow your users to assign their own labels to documents or to emails or to a team or to a SharePoint site, you can also have defined user permissions when applying that label. So when the users apply it themselves, the actions or the restrictions will come with it. And just another tip, when you apply a label, it travels with that file or that email wherever it is in the whole world. So if we sent something off to Spain, well, that file that's sitting in Spain will still have this label attached to it. Nobody can remove it except for the person that put it on. So that is a wonderful complement to DLP. So between DLP and data labeling, you have really secured your data from the end user's perspective as well. I told you earlier that users can have the option to create a justification of why they want to either demote the label, remove the label, change the label. And I did mention a little bit earlier that the only downside is its post. So once they put in their justification here, and then they change it, we, meaning admin, we will get notified, but it is after the fact. So just an FYI, that's why some clients are very careful about how many labels users can manually apply versus the automatically applying. Automatically applying is based on scanning. So it'll scan the data, find it, match it, and then apply it. So you have options. Now, licensing, if you're on the E3, it's manual. And when you have the E5, that's where you can take full advantage of the automatic labeling. By the way, with larger companies, it's very nice to have that automatic labeling in place. And here is an example of that auto labeling. So what it's done is it's scanned, it identified based on its criteria, it scanned, it found a label that should be appropriately assigned to this document, and it assigned it. That's that auto labeling in E5. Now, on the admin side of the fence, Microsoft has a functionality that allows admins to see what would have happened and what content would have been protected if the policy was enforced. This is called a policy simulation mode. In reality, administrators we don't like to just turn things on. We want to play with it, practice it, simulate it to make sure that we understand exactly what we're supporting and exactly what the users are going to experience. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to have too much interruption for your end users either. So when you click on a policy here, I'm inside the Purview portal, by the way, on the admin side. But when you click on a policy, you'll see more details about the policy and what we're finding in simulation mode. But keep in mind, this takes some time. So this is usually about 2 to 3 hours to practice in that simulation mode for it to be running and so on. So great thing if you want to do that. Again, it is dependent on licensing. Now let's take a look at the user experience with that auto labeling in a SharePoint site. So we talked a lot about Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Outlook, but I did mention too that you can also label Teams and you can label SharePoint sites. Now, when you label a SharePoint site, it doesn't automatically inherit that label. It's just that site itself has that label on it. So here you'll see that information, or the information worker, is in their SharePoint site. They can easily see that the project doc has been automatically labeled for them. This shows the power of auto labeling, where end users no longer need to go in one document at a time and manually label their content. Auto labeling provides enterprises the scale to automate and fully protect their content. So now we've seen how users can manually label, how we can automatically label as well. Now let's take it to the admin level again. We start off in the information protection node in the Compliance Center. So we're in the Purview portal, and we've gone over to the Compliance Center. This center is fantastic. It's our one-stop shop to configure and monitor compliance within our organization. So we know that many of our admins spend a lot of time to produce and define their label schemas and policies. Microsoft has added the smarts and intelligence to the system to make this easier for us. So as I mentioned about E5, if you are an E5 customer, you're eligible for these default policies that come with the Compliance Center. On the overview page, you should see a purple banner that shows you your organization's credit card vulnerabilities with the option to configure default policies to protect them. And it also depends on what you already have configured in your environment. If you don't have any labels today, CDW can help you create these default labels and to start introducing them as manually labeling. So a lot of times, some companies don't want to do the big bang. You don't have to. Start with E3, get your users using manual labeling so they understand why the labels are being applied and what to do should something need to be changed. And then down the road, perhaps upgrade to E5 and start using that automatic labeling. So I hope you can see as I go through this that this all ties back to Copilot. So you can see how important it is to protect your data when you're introducing Copilot. And I just wanted to also add that Microsoft has created some default labels and policies in the Admin Center for us to better understand how our workers are sharing and also working with these labels. So we're cognizant not to get in the way of our users. And these label and policies always start off with auditing. So this allows the admin to discover what their end users are sharing without blocking them. So they can then determine the right protections for their organization. These help admins quickly to get started, since the majority of our customers who have turned on the defaults usually keep them on, which I like. So not only does Microsoft Information Protection support auto labeling on behalf of the end user, it also supports co-authoring of content that has been labeled. So if you're not familiar, co-authoring is something that you get when you work in the cloud. It allows multiple people to work on the same document at the same time. So that co-authoring, you can still co-author on sensitive information documents that have been labeled. Now, this is unique to Office apps where multiple authors can edit and labeled and protected documents simultaneously. So with the co-authoring of the labeled documents, there's no need to compromise between productivity and security because it's already protected. Some features the users will experience are multiple users, like I said, can co-author, auto-save with the sensitivity labeling and protection that will stay in place by auto-saving, whether you work on the web or whether you work on your desktop client. So it's real-time collaboration just as it normally would be. It's just with the data labeling, there will be some restrictions around it. And we're getting near the end here. Now you can put retention and deletion policies in place. So that's usually the last thing that we like to chat about is retention. So we've talked about how we can label and protect, but now we got to talk about the life cycle of your data, because that too is very important with the output of your Copilot results. You don't want information that's not relevant or purposeful anymore. So on average, organizations wrestle with 5 different content systems and repositories on average. So duplicate information always happens across platforms, causes productivity loss, increases risks, and so on. So governance enables us to retain information and manage records under Purview, where data is created to prevent loss. So that's the other thing that Purview can do for you is the data lifecycle management. Again, licensing is key here, but just to share that these are all the possibilities you can have. So the volume, just to let you know, the volume of information is expected to grow 4 to 5 times over the next 2 years. So relying on manual classification is a great start for the E3 folks. But over time, it may become ineffective since users usually care most about the value of the information and less about the risks. So it's a challenge to hold them accountable and to classify on their own, but it's a great start at the same time if you don't want to do that big bang. By automating some of this information governance, you can leverage various as I mentioned, auto classification capabilities such as file properties, meaning example content type defined in SharePoint, pattern recognition, and machine learning classifiers. Now, my favorite place, Compliance Manager. So let's have a look at that a little bit more. So this manager allows you to continually assess and monitor data protection controls, get clear guidance. Oh, somebody's off mute there. I'm just going to help out. There we go. So yeah, I was just saying it gives you this compliance manager is so powerful. As I mentioned, I was starting to say that you get clear guidance on how to improve your compliance score. You can reduce compliance risks. You can leverage the built-in control mapping to scale your compliance effort and your Copilot deployment. So the complexity of the regulations make it challenging, yes, but you know, if we take specific actions that were recommended by Compliance Manager, that will provide us with better, more secure onboarding. Excuse me. And then with a simple design that works, it's out of the box. So as I mentioned, it's a great, powerful tool. Out of the box itself, it already is set up for what you need. When you go in here, and I mentioned, I might have mentioned earlier that you can do some scanning and so on. So that scanning, all of those results can be compiled in the Compliance Manager. So I'll give you an example of when we would recommend and use Compliance Manager, and that would be to do an assessment of your environment for your compliance regulations, such as GDPR, HIPAA, PII. So there's 150 plus assessment templates inside the Compliance Manager out of the box. So all over the country, global assessments. So if you are a Canadian company and you have work and business over in EU or anywhere else in the world that follows the GDPR regulation, then you can use the compliance assessments here to see where you're compliant and where you're not. So just to summarize, the compliance manager helps you with your compliance score, controls your mapping. It has a continuous regulatory updates that is maintained by Microsoft. We don't have to worry about that. It's updated by Microsoft. So all of the assessments are always current and it's always ongoing. And as I mentioned, being updated by Microsoft. So in summary, the compliance manager measures your progress towards completing recommended actions from the assessment that help you reduce risks around data protection and regulatory standards. And lastly, a common question I get asked is, how can we audit the data? So there's 3 capabilities Microsoft offers customers in audit to help them with their regulatory, legal, and compliance obligations. The first are additional audit events that help with forensic investigations. Microsoft now has delivered new events that helps investigators understand if mail items were accessed through the mail sync and the mail bind operations. So this is extremely helpful to organizations with regulatory obligations that require breach notifications, because now they can scope mail items that may have been compromised to reduce fines and penalties. So another key area is around retaining audit logs. According to the latest research, it takes roughly 6 months to detect a data breach, and organizations need a way to go back to the audit logs to conduct forensic investigations. And sadly, a lot of folks don't make it a priority for security, so it's always after the fact, then they start to think, oh, I wish I had to put on that security. So using the audit log is fantastic. Hopefully you will be doing it as a preemptive instead of a reactive. So the advanced audit extends the audit log retention from 90 days to 6 months. And new to audit actually is optionally a 10-year retention for highly regulatory customers that need to keep audit log data for longer. And for those using Activity API, audit provides 2 times the bandwidth compared to other customers, which is valuable, especially if customers are using audit data in third-party solutions. So I'm going to recap and then I'm going to pass it back to Brian.
So Cindy, we only have 1 minute left, so if you could just recap real quick and then I'll get into the offers because there's been lots of questions around that.
I didn't realize I was chatting that long, hence why I said it was scripted. Now you know why. I think I've said enough about Purview, so I'll pass it back to you.
Okay, awesome. There's just been 3 or 4 people asking in the chat about the different workshops. So this was our last slide of the presentation. Obviously, we're happy to have a follow-up conversation with you and your teams to walk through this, but the way to think about the different workshops and stepping up this ladder is every organization is at a different stage in their Copilot journey, and CDW has worked very closely with Microsoft to create different workshops and offers no matter what stage you're at. So Copilot value discovery is really step 1 if you're just starting to think about this. We've got end user skilling and training if you've already started a Copilot pilot or if you've started to roll them out. And then as we move up the stack, we get into our guided adoption, a value accelerator, and adoption accelerator. So we are happy to have a follow-up conversation with this. In respect of everybody's time, we do want to wrap up there and just thank everybody for joining us today. Again, we are very committed to Copilot at CDW. We're very committed to staying on top of Copilot and providing value back to our customers. If you have any suggestions for future topics, we'd love to hear it because we're always trying to add value in these sessions and happy to adapt based on client demand. So with that, thank you. I hope everybody has a great day and thanks for carving out an hour for us. Thank you. Bye-bye.